Redfern John Barrett has been featured on this channel before as the author of The Giddy Death of the Gays and The Strange Demise of Straights, and their new novel, Proud Pink Sky, releases worldwide on the 14th of March. Barrett was kind enough to give me an advance copy, so thank you for that. Proud Pink Sky is set in an alternate history in which, after the Second World War, Berlin became an independent city-state heralded as a haven for gay people. It's run by its own sovereign government that explicitly advances the interests of its gay population. The majority of its citizens are gay, and many of its locales were renamed into deliciously cringy pun names like Twinkstad. Queer people from all over the world flock to Berlin either because they vibe with the idea of a gay-run society or, more commonly, to escape the bigotry they're facing in their own countries. Two such people are Gareth and William, a pair of 18-year-old queers who flee from their families and their country in order to be together somewhere they'll be accepted. When they arrive in Berlin, Gareth finds that he fits into the gay city-state pretty well, while William struggles with the city's expectations of gender expression, and this discrepancy puts a strain on the pair's relationship. Meanwhile, Sissy, a straight-ish woman who moves with her husband and two kids to Berlin so her husband can find work, is accidentally caught in the middle of a protest clash with the police where her and her children wind up getting tear-gassed and helped to safety by one of the protesters. Afterwards, Sissy wants to find the stranger who helped her, and her search takes her to Remold, a poor district of the city housing mostly trans and gender non-conforming residents who have to deal with a near-daily deluge of harassment and vandalism from cisgender bigots in the surrounding areas. Through the eyes of William and Sissy, we find out that, despite the gay city-state being promised as a refuge, internal bigotries within Alt-Berlin have ended up recreating a hierarchical society with its own set of socially conservative factions who leverage the bigotries within the gay community in more or less the same type of power game that all queer people fled to Berlin to escape from. Bisexuals and pansexuals get accused of being heterosexual infiltrators, despite actual straight people still being welcome to live in Berlin. Polyamory is heavily frowned upon, even though sexual promiscuity isn't, and being trans or gender non-conforming basically turns you into a second-class citizen. The city has huge human rights problems, and William and Sissy are both coming face-to-face with those problems in their own ways. The plot is heavily character-driven, dramatic, fast-paced, and interwoven, and I enjoyed it a lot. There are so many queer characters in this novel, and all of them are fantastic. If you're familiar with Redfern John Barrett's previous works, then you'll know their writing tends to be relatively simple at the word-by-word level, but with very dramatic stylistic choices, which is still featured here. The novel incorporates Polari, a type of queer cant, heavily into the narration as the characters become more and more immersed in the culture of alternate Berlin. Barrett is extremely good at writing in a way that's appropriate for the character whose perspective is being followed, and they're also still as bold and shameless as they were back in Giddy Death. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, and yes, it is very tempting to interpret this alternate version of Berlin as an analogy for the contemporary queer community. You might think that the premise largely gives away most of what this novel has to say. The queer community isn't perfect, it has a lot of internal bigotry that needs to be stopped, and there are many queer people who come to LGBT+ because they were forced out of heteronormative society and yet still find themselves feeling unwelcome and forced out within the one supposed refuge that they have. Barrett has actually talked to me on radio about the phenomenon of certain queer folk pulling the ladder up behind them when it comes to human rights, despite it being to everyone's benefit in practice to make sure that all of us are granted the human rights that we deserve, that no one is left behind. And that's certainly not an incorrect reading of the novel's themes. However, I feel like an interpretation that stops there is leaving a lot on the table. This novel incorporates a lot of complicated ideas relevant to and directly about queerness and the queer community, many of which I cannot provide a holistic perspective on by myself, so I feel like I want to leave this discussion for the book club episode on this novel. I would very much love to hear a range of perspectives on this one. However, I will remind you that I will absolutely not feature any audience feedback that is bigoted in any any way. Criticizing me or the novel is perfectly fine, just don't be a bigot. Since this novel releases on the 14th, I'll make the cutoff date for sending in your feedback the 14th of June, and hopefully the episode featuring your feedback will be out later that month. Links to where you can acquire the book online are in the description. Also, a reminder that the cutoff for sending in your feedback and thoughts on The City and the City is the 10th of April, so you have one more month to acquire and read the book and send in your thoughts. I've already received some interesting feedback, both positive and negative, but I am always happy to receive more. Hope you've been enjoying this series so far, and thanks for watching.